for the interest in being able to.
Well, thank you for coming out this evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Bob Smith, and I'm excited about this opportunity to participate in this campaign. I guess in introducing myself, I should start out by saying I have a varied background, not just in law, but I have a degree in accounting. I'm a CPA, worked for some Big Four accounting firms before deciding to go on, and I received a Master's in Business Administration, an MBA, from the University of Notre Dame. I think that background has been very helpful to me in managing organizations. After doing that and working in business, and I went back to law school and went to the BYU Law School, where I was the editor-in-chief of the Law Reviews, finished in the top of our class, and was a member of the Order of the Court. Following that, I served with State Court, Supreme Court Justice. I also went to work as a tax attorney in Chicago for one of the large law firms in the country. Then I went to Washington, D.C. to learn how to fight with the IRS. And I became a controversy lawyer dealing with tax issues for national and international clients. I was then asked to return to Salt Lake, and I was invited to join the law firm of Kirkland & Conkey, where I was a shareholder and the chairman of the tax and corporate department of that law firm. I represented the taxable entities of the LDS Church for a number of years in defending them against IRS investigations and audits. I worked thereafter at a business in Bountiful, Utah. I was the executive vice president, and thank you. And
It's not yours.
oh, that's yours. Okay. And general counsel of a successful business in Bountiful, where we represented large companies like General Motors and Dow Chemical in their litigation. And so we were involved with massive litigation that spanned multiple time zones in the United States, dealing with lawyers all over the country. And thereafter, I came to the Brigham Young University Law School, where I've been for 7.5 years as the managing director of the International Center for Law and Religion Studies. In that, what does yellow mean?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. In that capacity, I've helped organize conferences around the world to bring people together to fight for religious freedom and for basic values and for freedoms. We bring government leaders of all kinds, legal officers who come together to figure out a strategy for fighting these battles. And what I would like to do is work with the attorneys generals of other states and fight those battles together with them.
Thank you.
I don't know who's next. Is it just
Yeah, just we'll go right on the line.
Well, thank you. My name is Scott Burns, and I want to thank the Davis County Republican Party. I want to thank my fellow potential appointee candidates. I'm not sure what we are, but we had a spirited debate and discussion last night, and this is democracy. People coming out on a Thursday night to listen to us. I was born and raised in Cedar City. My dad was a district attorney, and he was a judge, and I kind of grew up in a courtroom and decided at an early age that's what I wanted to do. When I was about 28, I just got out of law school. My wife and I opened our own law firm, Burns & Burns, and we did pretty well. It was my dad's name in a small community. I grew up there in high school sports and the hometown boy. And one day Ira Shotman picked me up. He's a local sheriff. He said, he always called me Pard. We can take a ride over to Parowan, Pard. And I said, okay. And we drove to Parowan, and we pulled in, and we went to see the clerk, David Yardley, and he said, well, your dad's on the phone. I said, okay, hi, Dad. Well, they got the forms filled out, and you're going to run for county attorney. And I said, I'm not running for county attorney. And he said, yeah, you are. And I said, well, how do you know I can win? And he said, well, it could be close, but there's nobody else filed. And it's 5 minutes to 5, and it's time you learn to be a real lawyer, and it's not about money, and some of it's about service. And you're going to do it for one term, and it paid something like $32,000 a year. My wife was not happy, but I did it. And 16 years later, I was still doing it, and I would have done it for free because The rewards from, and many of the people here know what I'm talking about public service, and frankly, I was in the victim business, helping people who sometimes literally have been thrown in the trash, have been raped, and families murdered and robbed. And so for 16 years, I prosecuted just about every kind of case, 2 death penalty cases, right down to speeding and rape and robbery and everything in between. And about 2000, somebody thought that they needed a prosecutor in Washington, D.C. to work in the White House. And I was asked, George Bush nominated me, and I was the deputy drug czar in the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. I did that for 7 years, and for a Cedar City boy, it was an eye-opener, flying all around the country, speaking for the president. I was also, he made me the sports minister, which is even more fun because I was in charge of all anti-doping, and I got to go to all the Olympics and represent our country. For the last 5 years, I have worked as the executive director of the National District Attorneys Association. It's some 2,500 elected DAs across the United States, dealing with every issue that prosecutors deal with. And it was coincidence, coming home for good, when Mr. Swallow resigned. A lot of friends at the AG's office and around the state, and decided to throw my hat in the ring with these other fine candidates. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm glad to be here tonight. I'm really thankful that you came to spend your time. I'm Michelle Mumford. You know me as the party's secretary, and you know me as somebody who's been involved and interested and invested in what we're doing. People have asked me why I'm running for Attorney General, and my answer is I think I can make a difference. I know I can make a difference and provide the leadership that the office needs right now. My experience in the legal field is strong. I went to BYU Law School. I worked in litigation in New York. I have experience on the appellate court on the 10th Circuit as a clerk and an attorney. Friends here in this room have asked me to counsel them on cases, and I'm barred in 3 states. But more than my experience, and I am a great lawyer, but more than my experience, I'm a good leader, and that's what this office needs right now. We need somebody able to go in there and lead, and set by example, and work hard, and make the right choices. Because sometimes it's hard. It's hard to do what's right. And that's why we need more of a leader right now, to go in there and stand up for the attorneys that have been in there working hard, that are excellent attorneys. There are some attorneys in there that perhaps haven't been making the right choices. And we need to clean them up and then make sure that we can refocus the office back on excellent lawyering. We need to refocus the media push and control the message onto the work that's important in the office. Things like child protection, things like Utah's abuse of prescription drugs, things like violent crimes. These are the things that matter to the people of Utah. And we're not hearing about those things. We're not hearing about how the Attorney General's office is working hard on those types of cases because we're distracted by what's going on. And I want to be able to go in there and make sure that we can refocus back on what's important. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions this evening and to talking with you on Saturday. Thanks so much. Thanks.
You should have stood up.
But your boots make up for it.
I'm going to take Michelle's lead.
Awesome.
Where's Linda? Thank you, Linda. Where'd you go for setting this up? Linda Pipkin, and all of you who are here in attendance tonight. Appreciate that very much. Pastor Crowder, thank you very, very much. Thank you for your support in the past and for your generosity tonight. And please thank Chris, too. And good luck in the basketball game. People ask Michelle why she's running for Attorney General. People ask me all the time, why are you running again for Attorney General? And my answer is simple, because I had a very enthusiastic vision for what the Attorney General's office could be and should be. And in the 18 months or so since that time that I had the opportunity to run last, my passion for service and my excitement about what we can make the Attorney General's office has not diminished, has not waned in any form. I have known many of you and appreciate all of you who are in attendance, particularly the Central Committee members, because I know what kind of a sacrifice it takes. I know how much time you spend away from the family. And we've worked together on a number of different and important issues. I don't think you're going to find that we differ much on policies or principles, frankly, or on the issues very much. But like Michelle, I believe that as I've spoken to you, you want what I want in the Attorney General's office. You want somebody who really is a leader, who can come in immediately and make the hard changes and return that office to its once proud state, to win back the trust of the public. You want somebody who's not worried about political agendas. The attorney's office is surrounded by politics, but I don't think it should be an overtly political office, if that makes sense to you. It shouldn't be about politics first. That shouldn't be what drives the decisions that we make to protect our citizens in the state of Utah. It should be about what's in their best interest and what's constitutional. I want to get back to just being fine lawyers, and it's going to take a little while. It's going to take more than 1 year. I think that's an important point too. I'm committed not only to come in and turn things around, which I think we can make significant strides immediately, but I'm committed to run in 2014 and run in 2016 and continue to hold that office for the Republican Party and make sure that we are the ones to clean things up there and rebuild confidence and trust. As I've talked to you, you said you want somebody who values the caucus system, as I do. You said you want somebody who's been vetted in a statewide election, as I have. As I've listened to you, you said you want somebody who has core, 30 seconds, principal values, and somebody who has the legal skills. And as I get a chance to talk to you more tonight, I'll tell you about that. Somebody who's got leadership and management experience, which I have plenty of. And I think that combination distinguishes me. Although I think highly of each of these fellow candidates on the stage, I think I have a very unique blend to bring, and it's what we need immediately, and what we'll need in 2014 and in 2016. So it's Sean Reyes, and I ask for your vote and support on the 14th. Thank you very much.
I'm Brett Rawson. Dressed this way tonight to give you a sense of how I dressed on the road going to all the corners of this state, driving an F-250 through a blizzard. It was important to me to get out on the road and meet people. I think that if this caucus system goes away, fewer people will ever do that. And it was a privilege and a pleasure to get out there and actually meet some folks. I hope I don't fall off this stage. I know you were worried looking at me.
Lots of lawyers here.
When I was a kid, there were two things I was interested in doing. I'm the son of a fighter pilot in the Marine Corps, and I wanted to fly jets like that. And the other thing that I thought about was being an attorney. My grandfather, who was a follower of the politics of Ezra Taft Benson, spoke highly of lawyers. And I guess he came from a time and a day when people had respect for attorneys, and I wish we could return to that time and that place. But I had those two interests, and I joined the Marine Corps as a young man and got injured right away and had to make some decisions about what was I going to do with my life now that I was out of the Marine Corps. And in doing that, I took a detour on my way to the practice of law and the study of law. I went to Brigham Young University and I got a master's degree. You're not going to believe what this master's degree is all about. I got it in mass communications, but I studied something called organizational crisis communications. What do you do to restore image to something that's broken, an organization that has failed? Whether it's a business, whether it's government, what are you going to say? What are you going to do to restore that public trust, that integrity? And that's what I studied. I was published in that. I then, after working in that field for a number of years, I found myself recommitted to the study of law. And I went to the nation's oldest law school, William & Mary, in Williamsburg, Virginia. And I had the time of my life. I was a little bit older by 5 or 6 years than some of my peers. I had more kids with me when I went through, but it was the experience of a lifetime. And since that time, I have represented the interests of government. I've represented municipalities. Now, I don't know if anybody else up here has done that, but primarily I have represented state municipalities. Now, the other thing I've done was represent the interests of the individual. Those are people who are the downtrodden, who are defendants, who find themselves before the criminal system. And I've had to do that on behalf of law enforcement officers and others. The other thing that I do, and I mentioned this in the debate the other night, is I'm involved in internal affairs. And boy, do we ever have an internal affairs issue at the AG's office right now. I am uniquely qualified to clean it up and to get on with the business of the state, and I ask for your vote. I'm Brett Rossick. Thank you.
Brett, my name is Michael Wilkins. I'm, with the possible exception, I think I'm the oldest guy here.
Hey.
And I'm dressed this way because I dressed this way for 16 years as an appellate judge. I was on the Utah Court of Appeals for 5.5 years, the Utah Supreme Court for 10.5. I am delighted to be here this evening. You will note that my table is festooned with my campaign literature. I'm not a politician. I don't pretend to be a politician in that sense. I have no burning desire to be elected, although I also may be the only one here who's been on the statewide ballot and won twice. As a judge on the Court of Appeals and on the Supreme Court as a justice, I was on the ballot in the judicial retention election, which is a lot easier to win. The question is, shall Judge Wilkins be retained in office? Yes, no. And although I'm pretty sure I hadn't offended that many people, 180,000 people voted no, although 500,000 voted yes. So I felt good about it. It was a good percentage. I'm doing this because you've heard it before. Some friends came to me and said I should do this. That's actually the honest truth in this instance. Some people whose judgment I have in the past at least respected came to me and said, Mike, you have something you can offer in this circumstance. It's a unique circumstance. It's a time when the state faces a crisis of confidence in the law, in addition to in the Attorney General. It's important to me that people recognize that the law is what sets this country apart from all the others on earth. It is the sanctity and the stability of the law in this country that makes people almost everywhere in this world want to live here. When you visit in other countries, it doesn't matter if it's, frankly, Canada or Mexico or Ukraine or in Asia or in Europe, people talk about how they really love to come here and raise their family. That's because what we have here is a system that allows you to count on things being predictable and consistent. That's what the rule of law does. The law should treat everyone the same, and when it doesn't, something is amiss. There's something amiss in the Attorney General's office. My view is it's time for a fresh start. It's a turnaround to be done. It's time to go there and thoughtfully but promptly make the changes that are necessary. I've been in the full-time practice of law, either as a lawyer or as a judge, for 37 years. Utah law. I've been here this entire time. I think I know how to do that, and I would appreciate the opportunity to be one of the 3 names that goes to the governor and let Governor Herbert try and figure out what really is best for the people of Utah. I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Tarvin. I grew up about 40 miles north of here on a small farm in Cache Valley. And if I'd had my way, I'd still be farming. I loved it. Maybe not tonight. It might be a little chilly up there tonight. But it still was a great way to grow up. Went to school at Utah State, went in the Army for a couple of years, came back, went to school at the University of Utah. Came out and practiced law for 10 years, and one of my classmates was Justice Wilkins' wife, Diane, and a great attorney in her own right, and went on to a distinguished career. I went to the Attorney General's office in 1988, and worked there for 12 years in the Tax and Revenue Division, where I loved my work. Not getting tax money out of you, but learning a lot about business and how to try cases. Courts of Appeal, Utah Supreme Court. It was a wonderful opportunity, and I there and then met a wonderful group of people. Well, events took me away from that occasion. I always had a love for the military. I was always in the Guard part-time. I was what they call a traditional Guardsman. And so in 2000, Governor Levitt asked me to run the National Guard, which I then did for 12 years under 4 governors. A lot of this military stuff you need to understand. Generals only succeed because of the work of those who work with them and under them. any accomplishments I have or those of other people. That's the similar situation that we have at the Attorney General's office. Today, we had a holiday luncheon there. Of the 440 employees in that office, there were 240 lawyers, 200 support staff. 310 of them were at the Rotunda today, and we were able to thank them for their work this past year. This has been a brutal year. One of our fine employees is here tonight. This has been a tough year for us. We're ready to move on and move out. The skill set that I bring to it is a deep knowledge of the office, how it works, what needs to be done. It needs to be done quickly, folks, because any of these folks, and I applaud all of them, and I came away from the debate last night thinking, this is going to be okay. We're going to get a good new Attorney General out of this process. But any one of them that comes to this job is going to find something real quick. You can only get rid of about 2 of the lawyers, the deputies. The rest are career services. So you have to know precisely what you're going to do when you begin to move to correct this system. It's going to be a huge challenge. You're going to have to know exactly where you're going and when you're going. You're going to have to rebuild some bridges with the legislature, with the executive branch. These are my former colleagues in large part. I worked for Governor Herbert. I think I can offer a meaningful way to do that. And I agree with Judge Wilkins. It's a turnaround. You've got to take politics out of this for a few months. Let this simmer down. Thank you much.
Actually, we'll come down here to Mr. Burns. Just a quick reminder that in the question and answer phase, it's a 1-minute answer. And for your attorneys, that's 1 minute. No rebuttals.
You can't clear
We were
the
good
throat
last
in 1
night.
minute.
There's no counter arguments. It's just a 1-minute answer. We appreciate it. And again, we're appreciative for the time, effort, energy that all of you have put into this. It's sometimes can be a grueling process.
In advance, I want to apologize because at 9 o'clock, there's a few of us that have to go get on a call. And so we're not being rude and we will be back.
Okay, so we'll start with Mr. Scott Burns, and then we'll work our way to the right all the way around. The first question is, what will you do on your first day on the job and into your first week?
Well, the first thing I would do is, and somebody mentioned it the other night, it's Basic Management 101. It's what I did at the National District Attorney's Office, a 60-year organization. It was on the verge of bankruptcy. The CFO had embezzled over $500,000, and my predecessor reeked of ethics violation. Asked for the resignation of everybody, as Brian said, that was appointed. And then I looked at, and I would look at the employees who are merit-based, but shouldn't be there. And Brian's right, there are some wonderful people there, but the first thing, you got to assess your team. Who do we have? Who is doing a good job? Who isn't doing a good job? Am I done?
No, you're good.
That's 30 scared. And make an analysis of the employees. You've got to look at the structure. I want to know what policies and procedures are in place, what ethical checklists there are in the office, what's the culture of the office. And I've said to AG employees and others, I'm going to go around and meet all 410 employees. I'm going to shake his or her hand, find out what they do. That's time intensive, but it's something that has to be done.
I agree. One of the most important things that we would need to do going in on the first day is to listen to the people that are there, that have seen what's gone on and know the culture and the practices and the policies, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And then you make an analysis. What works, what needs to be changed, and you change it. And you tell them this is how we're going to do it, and then you go forward. And that's what I would do.
Thank you. Aside from my legal practice, I've done turnarounds for businesses, so I know a little bit about this. And those assess, analyze, allocate, and attack, those are the 4 A's that I use also. So day 1, you're meeting with every single person in the office, not all on the same day, but as soon as you can. Top to bottom leadership, ask for the resignations, see who will reapply, because that fosters a true competitive environment, and you want the people who are hungry applying. Ask and listen and find out, and then externally from there, sit down with the executive branch. We need time with the governor and the agencies, and healing some of those relationships has been alluded to. And then get out to the outer counties and make sure that every county feels that it has a voice That's been missing as well. The Attorney General's office needs to be out in each county listening to the stakeholders there, supporting the county attorneys and supporting all of the stakeholders as well. So those are some of the very first things I would do in addition to an audit, ask for an audit, not to be disruptive, but I've had Assistant Attorney General say we would like one so that the public knows what a great job we're doing and that we're doing it well and right.
The General mentioned that there were only a couple appointed positions. And I have to imagine with the challenges of the AG's office, it may go beyond that. Now, he also mentioned that there is a merit system. That's a system of protection. It provides some due process rights to employees. And it's not reasonable to believe that that process is quick. It's not. It may not even be something we can get through in the first year because of the process that is in place for employees. Now, what I'm going to do in the first day, I look at this a little bit differently. I want to talk to line officers and line staff people. I want to talk to the people, the little people. They know what's going on, and I have a hunch, just an idea, that they're not the problem. That if there's a challenge inside this office, it's really probably not with them. I'll be talking to them. And I'm also probably the only one up here that for a living right now works inside of that merit system. I currently represent individuals before the Career Service Review Office. Thank you.
As I understand the question is, what would I do on the first day and in the first week?
Yes, sir.
On the first day, I would ask General Tarbert to come and sit down with me. And I would probably spend the majority of that day trying to pick his brain and understand what he understands about what has gone on and what needs to go on. Because generally, no pun intended, I respect his judgment. In addition, I would want to meet with the division chiefs. I think those are the key players initially. That's the first day, maybe the first day and a half. The other thing that I could guarantee is I would be in the office every day. I would be in the chair every day. I'd be there before others arrived and after others left, so that people who wanted to talk to me and felt like they had a burning issue to share could do exactly that. I think that's a good way to begin.
Well, I've already had my first day. And important steps were taken. First of all, the idea of audits is a good one, but you need to target them. The first thing I had looked at was our vehicle usage. I've had the state auditor come in and examine that. We've started a top-down review of our grandma is access to government records. We started to revise that because in this process we found a failing with that. The larger sense, when someone comes in here shortly, they're going to have to make top changes at the deputy level. That happens every administration. It's to be expected that it should be done. But the Career Service Act that we talked about, I need to make one comment about that. It is to isolate the attorneys from politics. It is not to protect them. You don't want your entire Attorney General's office changing, whether you have a Democrat in or a Republican in. Many years ago, Scott Burns ran against Jan Graham, who was my boss. She was a Democrat. And I have to think if either one of them had won, there would have been no difference in how that office conducted its business.
All right, thank you very much. You know, as I think about the problems that were discussed last night, I'm struck by two issues. One is the campaign contribution issues. The other is the possibility of actual criminal wrongdoing where there's missing files and hard drives and things like that. Those require two different responses. And I think I would first sit down with the general and discuss with him his concerns about both of those issues to lay out a strategy. The second thing I think is important to realize is, besides being in the chair every day, we need to be thinking about the people of Utah. I think it's important to hold a press conference. When there's a new president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they hold a press conference to talk to the members of the church. When this person is in this position, you need to talk to the people in the state of Utah and give them your commitments, lay out your plan, help them understand what we're going to do so they don't guess and wonder what we're trying to do at the Office of Attorney General.
Thank you. We will start with Michelle Mumford. I appreciate your answers. What will you do in addressing the federal lands transfer that need to be transferred to Utah? And why will your actions be more successful than our last Attorney General?
Well, from what I understand, Attorney General Swallow, this was a very important issue to him, and it's something that he actually really addressed well in the rural areas. And it is an important issue, especially to our rural areas. We have resources, we have funds, and that are available that belong to us. And the time is right for us now with the new legislation with HB 148. I was going to say 184. With HB 148 with Ken Ivory's bill, and the other states, 4 other states that have passed similar legislation. The time is now to build the coalition, to take it on a national level, to make sure that our delegation is supporting that effort. Now, as Attorney General, it's important that our state officers are on board on that fight. And if the case litigation is necessary now, then we should go forward with that. But we should start on a PR on a federal delegation level.
Thanks. I would definitely continue the fight on the RS 2477 roads. I think that's an important one. Many of you who are out in the rural areas understand how important those are. I also want to look for some easy cases, some easy wins, because this is such a big issue and it's going to take us many, many years, and we can't win overnight. Those easy cases are some of these. We have SITLA lands that are set apart for the education of our children. Constitutionally, we should have access to develop those. We can't in many instances because the federal government, it's landlocked around those. I'd like to file some lawsuits there because I think we could win not only legally, but in the court of public opinion. And that's what we're going to need in order to really be effective with HB 148. Not just a lawsuit from Utah alone. I think Wayne Niederhauser and Ken Ivory just met with 100 leaders or so from many of the western states on December 7th. That's the type of coalition building that I would like to continue, and I think I can bring with Western attorneys general, with the governors, and with a number of organizations, both private and public, to help us with this fight. It's a critical one because we could fund our $2.6 billion education shortfall with taxing those lands.
Isn't it interesting that this is an issue that's not just an issue for Utah, that there are Western attorneys general that are interested in this, and that they are from red states and blue states. This is a wonderful opportunity to take something into the federal court and make our way to the United States Supreme Court. I know that Mr. Swallow was very interested in this, but I think he was distracted, and I think we could have gotten further along. Now what we do is we file the lawsuit. We can do that. We can do that in the next 11 months, and I think we should. I've had an opportunity to travel some of those roads that Sean referenced. We took a little scenic route, maybe on purpose, maybe not, over a dirt road, and I can't imagine not having access to some of those lands. SITLA is one question, but there has to be a vehicle to hold public lands, even if it isn't SITLA, where we have continued access, where people with cattle can continue to access lands where their cattle grazes. There are people out there who are concerned about that, and we need to make sure that that is preserved.
As I understand it, Tony Rampton is the lawyer in the Attorney General's office responsible for this portfolio. And it has seemed to me inappropriate for me to be calling Tony up and asking him what he's doing at this point. Were I to become Attorney General, I would meet with Mr. Rampton and find out what the status is. I believe there are opportunities when a state sues the federal government to take that action directly to the Supreme Court. I'm not sure we have to file that in the federal trial court and ask them if they agree with us or not. I think we have some options that may not have yet been pursued. I'm not at all sure that we need to be the lead, but I think I'd prefer to be, because I think we have more interest and we're smarter about it than a lot of states have. I think if Utah were to file an action, we might do a little better job explaining it than California would, who also have a lot of land locked into the federal law.
I think I agree with what Bob Smith and Michelle have said. We've got to build some coalitions here with our state and federal officials. Rob Bishop's done a good job leading out on this, but those need to be pursued. I don't think we're going to win this in court alone. We're going to have to win this politically. We're going to have to move this along in terms of coalitions working this. We've had some notable successes. Mike mentioned Tony Rampton, Harry Suval, those roads people are doing a terrific job. We've had some key wins. It's important that we do this because they're out in the field every day with video cameras taking depositions of people that are dying, who are the only ones that have a remembrance of those roads. So we don't have a lot of shelf life to get this fixed. And working with Kathleen Clark at the Public Lands Office, we've done a good job. But I think we've got to move on a broader front, both at the federal and state level, to crack this nut.
Attorneys can cooperate. That's very important. You know, this is a huge issue, and I think there's broad agreement amongst us about the strong legal arguments that will ultimately prevail if the rule of law is followed. But I think it's important to recognize that the rule of law has not been in high priority at the White House the last few years. We don't have an executive branch and leaders at the federal level who care strongly about the rule of law. And so this is going to take more than just a great legal argument from the AG's office in Utah. It's going to take the strong legal argument of the AGs of all the western states. And it's going to take the political power of all of those people in all those western states. And imagine the power of blue and red states all coming together and prevailing on the federal government. Trillions of dollars are at issue. They won't come easily. So we need to join together with others and create a legal and political strategy that will win.
I grew up down there, and this won't sound very lawyerly, but I'm sick of them. I mean, we dealt with prairie dogs, digging up our cemeteries, digging up the golf course, stopping at dairy with 40 high-paying jobs because there were 21 prairie dogs and we could only get 19 permits. It is absolutely ridiculous. And now it's the sage grouse. Honestly, there are pilt issues, there are overreaching issues. We talked about SIPLA. I'm sick of it. I mean, I wish we had somebody that would pull a Ted Cruz and talk about our land issues. I spoke to the National Attorneys Generals last week in New Orleans, and I got with General Suthers of Colorado, General Wazin of Idaho, and others, and said, we need to do this together. We need to do this together because the federal government should not be telling us where we can hunt, where we can graze our cattle, how much they're going to pay us for this. And in some years, they don't pay us. They don't even reimburse us. And Sean's right, everybody's right, in saying that this has to be a priority for the state of Utah.
Tell people what FIELD is, payment in lieu of...
Payment in lieu of taxes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
This will start with Mr. Sean Reyes. The question reads, will you support non... Do you need a third one? The question reads, will you support knock and enter warrants for minor infractions? And if you don't mind, can I just modify it a little bit because I don't think we've ever had an infraction, no knock warrant. I'm not even sure I've ever seen a misdemeanor. So if you don't mind, can I change that to will you support no knock and enter warrants for non-violent felonies?
Yeah, no, I'm opposed to those. I think that they impinge too much on our civil liberties. Not only no knock and warrantless searches that our Attorney General in the past has tried to get passed through the legislature, administrative subpoenas. I know there are people in the office who think that they are valuable. And I think law enforcement, of course, if their job is easier, they're interested. But the important thing here in the office, and I will say from day one, our office will not win the wrong way. We're not going to cheat and deprive people's civil liberties in order to do our job. If we have to work harder, if we have to work smarter, then that's what we must do. But I am absolutely not willing to give away what's already been eroding far too much in our state. And so even though administrative subpoenas are used prevalently, since it's not mandatory and I have discretion, day one I am going to instruct our office that we will not use those because I believe that's cheating and winning the wrong way. Thank you.
I can tell you that no-knock warrants, I can say this from experience, they're very, very dangerous. They're dangerous to all involved. They're dangerous to the people inside, and they're dangerous to law enforcement. It's not the kind of thing that you take lightly. Now, having said that, there has to be a balance with law enforcement because the original idea was that this was for the safety of police officers. But I agree that it better be a concern about violent crime. Now, if you're investigating a drug case and you are concerned that people inside have guns, you better be able to articulate the probable or plausible use of those firearms against law enforcement in the course of an affidavit, and get that in front of a magistrate who, with their experience, can look at it and make a wise decision. Is this right for the community? Are rights being violated? And if they are, we don't use them.
As long as a warrant is presented to a neutral magistrate, and the neutral magistrate approves the sworn testimony that leads to the warrant, then the warrant is constitutional. If there is a legitimate circumstance, whether the crime involved is violent or not, if there's a legitimate circumstance where law enforcement can demonstrate to the neutral magistrate that there is danger in announcing themselves at the door, and that there's a likelihood of harm to peace officers, I think a no-knock warrant in a non-violent crime setting is fine. I think the question is, will the encounter be violent? And I think it should be used very sparingly. I think it should be used very carefully. And as long as the police are put to their proof, and the judge who considers the warrant is thoughtful, I think people will be protected. I think they're overused.
I think it's a balancing test, and I think Justice Wilkins got it just right.
Well, you now know a lot about the law that goes behind no-knock warrants. Let me just add my feeling that the only justification is the safety of the peace officers who have to carry out and execute the warrant. And I think we have to keep their safety in mind. But we also have to be concerned about the safety of others and the civil liberties that are at issue. We live at a time when the government intrusion has become very great. We know all about the NSA, we know about the IRS and its activities, we know about a number of different activities where the government has become very intrusive in our lives, and we have to protect our right to privacy from the officers in the state. And so I would be very anxious to balance that test in a way that is not overused.
Well, as the only prosecutor, I actually had to make those decisions for 16 years. That the White House interacted with and advised DEA nationwide, internationally, 62 international offices, and currently advise and work with 2,500 elected district attorneys. No-knock warrants, as has been said, should be the rarest of rare occurrences. It should be when there is no other alternative. You can't wait till he goes to the grocery store. You can't wait until he's out in the backyard. Does it have to be in the middle of the night when a confrontation is ensured? It should only be when this person is violent, when we have information that they're armed, when there's surveillance cameras that are going to tip them off, that they've got dogs. I mean, all of those things have to be articulated. And again, when I was a DA, and my DAs across the country that I talk to, it is the rarest of circumstances.
No, I'm last. I think we all agree that they have been abused. And I don't like no-knock warrants. And I think it's the job of the Attorney General to protect the liberties of the people. The problem when something has been abused is you have to therefore go and make sure that you protect what has been abused. So whether it's constitutional or not, perhaps as a practical matter, it makes sense to not use them in order to show that we are taking every effort to ensure the liberties of the people. So whether it's constitutional or not, you've got to go all the way to the other side and make sure that you show that you can protect it. As a, not a PR move, but a, okay, I can use it, but I'm going to choose not to use it and still get the outcome that is intended.
Thank you. We will start with Brett Rawson. and I'll work my way through the question. There's a citation at the top of the question that references the Utah Constitution right to bear arms. And understanding that the Attorney General's office should provide supervision to all county and district attorneys, the question relates around law enforcement officers arresting or citing individuals' peace when they are lawfully carrying firearms. What is your position on this?
I think this is a great question. No matter which way you cut it, if somebody walks into a supermarket with an AR-15 strapped on their back, I equate that a little bit to screaming fire in a theater. You have to use common sense. You have to be very, very responsible with the use of firearms. Now that's coming from somebody who has always had a concealed weapon permit in every state that I've lived in, including Virginia, where they asked me, actually a judge, I had to see a judge. I walked in and I asked him, he asked me questions about why I was intending to have a firearm. And in that instance, I said, because it's my right. He said, right answer. He signed the form and I was out of there in 10 minutes. I'm a big proponent of the Second Amendment. I fought for the rights of individuals. I had a case, an interesting case that the NRA actually funded. It had to do with a pawn shop. It sold a firearm to a man who used the gun in a murder and had to defend the right of that pawn shop to sell that weapon.
As I understand the question, it was premised on the Utah constitutional right to bear arms. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir. There's a citation. I can read it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. The Utah Constitution is different from the federal Constitution in that it allows constitutionally the legislature to set by law certain restrictions on the right to carry arms, and it has done so. There are certain places in this state by law you cannot carry a weapon, and it's because the state legislature has set those limitations. The Attorney General doesn't make policy on carrying firearms, nor do I think the Attorney General should make policy on carrying firearms, whether they supervise the county attorneys or not. That's a legislative prerogative. They're theoretically at least closer to the people and have made those decisions. The Constitution was enacted by the people, so I would simply enforce the law as it's written.
I've enjoyed many of these questionnaires we've all had to fill out over the past few days. And it's asked us dozens and dozens of questions about what we think and why we think it. But in point of fact, the Attorney General does not make law and does not make policy. Now, I say this as a proud owner of multiple shotguns. There's nothing I'd rather do on the weekend than go out with the boys. They hit the targets, I miss them, but we all have a good time. So I take great pride in that, and great pride in the use of the weapons. But in point of fact, in areas like this, the Attorney General follows and enforces the law. If you want to change those, you do that legislatively with your legislative representatives. Thanks.
I would agree with those comments. I think this is an issue that involves the legislature. I think there's a vigorous debate in the state. There's a great deal of animated feeling because of the federal rules and the federal concerns. And I think that while that we live in a state that has its own state constitution and its own restrictions, I think it's all in the shadow of the federal questions. And I think it's important that when we give signals about laws, that we take that into consideration. And I think there are many that work at the federal level that don't have the same respect for the Second Amendment. And we have to reinforce that notion whenever possible. And so that would be my view on what to do.
Maybe I missed the question. I thought the question was, would we support someone being charged with disturbing the peace if they had a valid and lawful permit? Was that the question?
Correct. Understanding what the Utah Constitution reads under the citation, and understanding that the Attorney General's office is tasked with supervising district attorneys, what is your stance on law enforcement issuing citations for disturbing the peace for individuals lawfully carrying a gun?
I'm a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. I believe that under the laws of the state of Utah, support people's right to bear arms. And sans some outrageous, ridiculous example of somebody who won't cooperate with law enforcement carrying an AR-15 15 through a grocery store to his kindergarten class were drawing guns, which I think we all would agree is not acceptable. It's in our culture, it's in our heritage.
I would make sure that those cases are dismissed if cases are brought that are against the laws that exist right now. There are over 500,000 concealed carry permits right now. And Utah is a leading state on this issue. Our citizens are responsible, they're trained, they know what they're doing, and I support those rights.
I learned early in my legal career not to disagree with a judge, particularly a Supreme Court judge. So on the constitutional issues, I absolutely agree with the justice. However, I am a strong proponent of the Second Amendment, concealed carry permit for many, many years, NRA approved, and I'm not a fan and do not support law enforcement citing people who are lawfully carrying. I just don't. That is the law, and they're allowed to do it. And I understand there's a balance. I understand that there is a concern in public, but disturbing the peace, you have to show some other conduct aside from. There are too many people who are good, honest Second Amendment supporters that I've heard of getting harassed for that kind of lawful conduct. So I absolutely do not condone citations for lawful carry. And I would support constitutional carry, by the way.
Thank you. Who wrote that question? I thought so. I'll talk to you about it. I understand. The Representative Ray, the clarification I missed that. I apologize. Okay, Michael
You gonna
Wilkins.
tell us how you scored us on that one, Fred, too? Since I know, I've seen your little checklist.
Well, we had that happen. We had that happen in Riverdale.
I was just teasing.
We had a guy carry an assault rifle into JCPenney's in Riverdale a while back, so you know.
We handled it correctly, just so you know. Michael Wilkinson, he will start on this question. Please tell us your position with regards to asset forfeiture and if agencies who were involved with seizures should be recipients of those assets.
It's Wilkinson.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I've been called a lot worse. Asset forfeiture is a tool which, if used sparingly, can actually help support the fight against various kinds of crime that are profit centers. Asset forfeiture that becomes the purpose of the activity by law enforcement is a mistake. I think if it's used with extreme caution, if it's used under judicial supervision, if those whose assets are tagged are given the reasonable and appropriate opportunity to protect their own assets, I think it can be a good tool again. I think the way it's used now, it's overused. I think agencies respond to the likelihood of being able to fund their operations from it. Not that that's a bad thing. They want to do, I think, what's right. But I think this is the wrong motivator for that purpose.
When asset forfeiture becomes a profit center for the agency, then I think we have a problem. If asset forfeiture is tied tightly to the commission of a crime, in other words, if the assets that are forfeited were those used in perpetrating the crime, then I have much less heartburn with it. But it requires extremely careful oversight, should be just judiciously used and carefully monitored.
You know, I agree that it's overused, and I think that the problem with asset forfeiture is it leaves potentially innocent persons without their assets, and they're completely innocent of any crime, and there's no particular remedy that may result in them other than agency discretion. And I think it's a problem for the agency to receive those funds because their discretion is compromised. I think one of the issues, if we've learned anything during the last year, is that money corrupts. And we don't want to have agencies with a financial incentive to go out and seize the assets of unwitting persons whose assets are used in a crime. So I think it's very important that we safeguard the due process rights that people expect. Most people do not understand asset forfeitures. If the person, unless they are prove that the person was knowingly involved. And so I think it should be very scary.
Now, I've debated this issue at the Cato Institute, at the Heritage Foundation, and with people in this state and outside of this state. And I just have to tell you honestly, if it is used prudently by people with good judgment, it's a tool. I started the Iron Beaver County Narcotics Task Force. At the time, cocaine was going north and large amounts of money was going south to Mexico. And in hidden compartments in cars, we'd find $780,000 from a resident of Mexico with cocaine in the trunk. I had no problem seizing and forfeiting that money to be used either in education or roads or to help law enforcement. But then we hear the crazy stories of a 16-year-old who was caught with a joint and they seized his mother's farm. I'm still trying to find that farm. It didn't happen. And I'm not saying that there aren't abuses, but when good women and men in positions of trust, either prosecutors or in the Attorney General's office, use it appropriately, and then the money is taken care of. I just came through a deal in Atlanta where the DA there is using it to pay his own tickets and remodel his house. I think we have a problem with that.
Can you ask the question again?
If I could find it. Please tell us your position with regards to asset forfeiture and if agencies who were involved with seizing those assets should be recipients of those assets.
I just wanted to make sure it was not more specific. Agencies that are involved with seizing it should not be the recipients. Under the statute right now, the myriad of agencies, 10 or 12, are the ones that where these funds are directed. It used to go to education, and in 2002 it was changed. Before education, it was criminal. So it went from criminal enforcement to education, and then back to law enforcement agencies. I think that's a problem. I think it incentivizes our law enforcement to seize assets of defendants who needed to defend themselves. And so when it is overused, that's my Fourth Amendment concern. I've seen it used, though, in drug cases, like and when you can make that connection, great. But right now, I see it being overused.
Agreed. To the second part of that question, I absolutely don't think that the agencies should be allowed to hold that and use those proceeds. It's a total incentive for doing potentially the wrong thing, again, violating people's civil liberties. Asset forfeiture, we as a people, we settled that issue in early 2000, and it was an attorney general of ours who worked with law enforcement to get that back in. Here's my biggest problem with civil asset forfeiture. So many times it is abused. It's done without the property owner's knowledge. It's done even though that property owner is never charged with the crime, and it's done based on the lower civil standards that apply. And there are rare instances, I will concede, where I think it could be an effective tool, and if the owner is charged criminally, I have less of an issue with it. I'm still not a fan of the idea, but importantly, as Michelle said, let's put that money back into education and disincentivize having it go to the watchers.
These are felonies that we're talking about, serious crimes. Could you imagine being charged with something, accused of doing something, and then losing the opportunity to exercise your constitutional right to defend yourself? We live in a society with a system where we pay for legal services. And if you don't have the ability because your assets have been seized and taken, how are you going to realistically provide that defense? I've seen that in my practice. I've seen that with the people I have represented from time to time. Now, there's a middle ground here that we need to consider. There's the ability to seize assets when it's appropriate, when the standard is high enough, and then take those funds and put it in the general fund. Why does it have to go directly back to the agency? I think that incentive should not be there. An agency should have to approach the government and ask for funds the same way every other agency approaches the government to ask for funds. That's my answer.
Thank you. Brian Tarbett. This is kind of combining of two questions. if I can kind of get through this.
I can't handle one.
Understanding that the Attorney General's office has lost some public trust and confidence, what will you do to bring back pride and integrity to this office? And without you revealing possibly, do you have any previous indiscretions or skeletons waiting to escape your club? I'm just reading the question. Good to know, good to know.
Just don't send anybody up to Cache Valley when I was 16, and then I'd be okay.
Just on his way out.
You know, I'll be honest with you. The cloud is lifting off the Attorney General's office right now. The people are regaining their confidence. We need to go through this process, but right now we're moving forward. We've got some issues to work. We've got
An organization has a problem. You open it wide up. This is the people's office. This is not the Attorney General who sits in a chair and has his kingdom. This is the people's office, and you open it to the people. Now, there are investigative issues that make it such that we have to be careful about when information is released relative to ongoing investigations, but that's different from looking inside and taking a look to see where the problems are. Today, an arrest was made. Charges were filed, if you read the paper, on individuals with connections to formerly the Attorney General's office. This is a very difficult time for Utah. It's time for that to stop. It's time for us to get on with the business of government.
That's really a tough question. I can promise you this. If you send my name to the governor, I won't embarrass you. If the governor chooses to appoint me as Attorney General, I won't embarrass him. And if I become the Attorney General of Utah, I won't embarrass the state of Utah. I think my public service over the past 16 years or so is sufficient proof that if there was something wrong with me, you would have seen it. Because I was involved deeply in some important decisions by our Supreme Court, some which were not liked by various parties. Almost every case has somebody who has to lose, and often they're not happy about it. I've never been accused of anything that I'm aware of that had any basis in truth that would embarrass me, much less you.
Okay, Bob Smith, how do you feel about illegal immigration? And does Utah do enough to prosecute illegals that commit crimes?
That's a really important question. Obviously, we're in the middle of a political debate about illegal immigration. We have a bill that's been passed, signed by the governor, and has not been put into effect yet. I think everyone, most Republicans, I should say, agree that we don't want to encourage illegal immigration. I think the question, though, it's a human question, and what to do about the fact that we already have persons who are not properly in this country. And so we obviously want to stop the inflow of immigrants, illegal immigrants, but this is a federal question as well, and it's important to recognize that under the U.S. Constitution, immigration is a federal prerogative, and so we have to work cooperatively with the federal government in solving this problem. I think it's mostly a political issue, and as the Attorney General, I would follow the law and enforce the laws as they're in effect.
Agree. I mean, by the very term illegal immigration, I think there are great privileges and blessings that come to being United States citizens. And I mean, whatever we decide to do federally, when people come to our country, somebody said to me once, it was Hispanic, they at least ought to sign the guest register before they check into the hotel. We have to address this issue compassionately, but in the same breath, it's not right for people who don't, in Washington, D.C., I see people lined up all the way down the street doing it right, carrying babies in the heat and filling out the forms and trying to meet the law, and others who don't, for some reason, they just get a pass, and I don't agree with that.
I agree that illegal immigration is a federal issue. as a state attorney general and our agencies and offices, we need to be supporting and making sure that we're coordinating with ICE and protecting those responsibilities that they have. We also need to, as a state, make sure that our identity fraud has the resources that it needs. And the Attorney General's office has a division specifically for this. And it needs to be a priority, especially as related to children that are being targeted with their identities that nobody ever knows that their identity has been stolen because they're 6 years old or they're 8 years old and they don't need to go and they never find out because they're not writing checks and things like that. The resources need to be put aside and given to that department so that that's a priority.
I opposed HB 116, which is an unconstitutional bill. I supported HB 497, which I think was a proper exercise of state's police power, mandating background checks for those who are arrested for serious crimes and offenses. Like Michelle, I think there's thousands of cases of identity theft that occur. Secure Strike Force needs to be resourced to take care of that, and I would aggressively pursue identity theft, particularly where it impacts our children. Not just our children now, but our children who aren't even born yet. We also need an E-Verify bill that has some teeth, and I would do everything in my power as Attorney General to pressure the federal government once and for all to come up with a comprehensive solution, starting with border enforcement.
The Secure Strike Force that Sean mentioned is a unit that goes after violent crime, gang crime, drug crime by undocumented foreign nationals. That work is important and it has to continue. Also, I would say that I'm not a fan of amnesty. I know there has to be a pathway to citizenship, but that pathway should not put those who have illegally entered our borders in front of those who are legally trying to do what's right. Now, as I've traveled across Utah, I've met folks, conservatives, who have cattle ranches and who have hotels and whose businesses rely on some of these people. And they want to do what's right. They call the federal government and they say, what should we do? Should we fire everybody? And they get mixed messages all the time. There's something that we can do as a state. There's something that has to be done now.
I believe everybody should follow the law. I believe that citizens have an obligation to honor and support and sustain the law. I believe those who don't should be subject to the consequences of the law. I think illegal immigration is illegal. I think if the legislative body of the United States chooses to get its act together and give us some pathway that works, that's fine. I think in the interim, the current law should be enforced. I don't think there's a lot of room for judgment in that issue. I think there's a lot of room for compassion, but I don't think that compassion has to do with excusing a violation of law.
Several years ago, I had responsibility for a group of young men, and one of those was an illegal alien who was picked up because his tail light was out and fell into the embrace of ICE in the local county's jail. I got to go visit him over the next few weeks as he was being deported, and I went down to the ICE offices on 53rd South and Murray and put him on a plane to Argentina. This tears family apart. We need compassion. On the flip side, Utah National Guard was one of the first units on the border building the fence. They work. Borders work. They can be secured. But it is a federal question, and it's like we talked about last night. This is one of those issues where the federal government's running roughshod over the rule of law. You need to change your president, change your Senate. You can make some progress on this.
Thank you. This will be the last question. It will actually be a combination of two questions, if you can try to hit both of them. If I didn't get to your question, I apologize. We are going to probably stop about 9:30, 9:35 to give you some time to talk to the candidates before they leave, so you can address maybe that question to them as they mingle with it.
We're stopped.
I don't know. You know what? We'll give you a 30-second closing statement. Is that okay?
It's already 9:40.
Fabulous.
9:30.
Fabulous. Okay, so this question is first, what is your Martindale Hubble rating, and how do you feel about the Count My Vote initiative? All within a minute.
I can be very quick. I haven't had a Martindale Hubble reading for a long time. When I did, it was a #1, 5-star, but as a prosecutor, it was kind of irrelevant to me. I really didn't care. I get called every week. If you pay this money or send this in, you can be super lawyer under 50 or the best lawyer in America. That's $2,000. So, you know, I don't take much stock in that. To count my vote on the caucus issue, I've been talking all day to people on the phone. When I ran for Attorney General twice against Jan, first time less by 0.5%. I've been the beneficiary of both. In that race, my primary opponent was the Deputy Attorney General at the time, Michael Deemer, and I won in the primary by about 80,000 votes. And I don't know that that was healthy. I had to spend money that I didn't have against a Democrat in the fall, and frankly, he beat me up worse than Jan did. In the second one, I got 70% at the convention, and I really liked that a lot. So coming off that election, I like the caucus system.
I also am not rated by Martindale Hubble right now. I'm the Dean of Admissions at B-Wayne Law School. Before that, I was a staff attorney in the 10th Circuit. So they don't rate those sort. As of the caucus system, I, as you know, have worked hard over the past 6 months to push reform and improvements to our caucus system so that we can show the people of Utah that 1, we're inclusive, and 2, the caucus system is worth saving and preserving, because the caucus system is the reason why our state is so successful. It's the reason why our representatives and our senators are who they are. It's the reason why our businesses are successful and welcomed into the state. It's the reason why we're here tonight, and I believe in it, and I've worked for that.
I grew up in California, and I do not want a direct primary. It will ruin the grassroots politics that you and I know and love. I've worked arm in arm with Chairman Gabrielson against the Count My Vote initiative, and I'm a very big supporter of the caucus system. As far as the Martindale Hubble rating, I know Scott was being a little tongue-in-cheek. That's one rating you cannot buy. It's done anonymously. It's done by people that you don't even know or are necessarily rating you, by your peers that you've worked with and against in courtrooms. And it is an honest assessment, at least from your peers, about whether they trust you and what your skill levels. You can have an A, B, or C rating for skill level, but you cannot get a skill rating until you get a B for integrity. So you have to be honest, professional, and your peers have to get that. I haven't had an AV rating, the highest integrity and skill rating, since I was a senior associate. So I was a little ahead of my time in getting it, but I'm proud of that Martindale Hubble rating, and I would appreciate, again, your vote December 14th. Sean Reyes, thank you.
That's what I had too, the highest.
Pardon, we went back.
I mentioned in my opening comments that I've been all over the state of Utah, and I expect somewhere there are members of the GOP that don't like the caucus system, but I haven't met it. And certainly not in the rural parts of the state. I really feel like folks out there will lose a voice, and they want the caucus system to stay right where it is. And folks in this room have told me the same thing. I'm for it, and I appreciate the opportunity to be among you and to talk to you and to find out what your interests are, wherever you are from. You know, I don't know much about Martindale Hubble. I know that I've been rated on the other rating system, which is Thomson Reuters. I've been a Mountain States Rising Star. I don't know how many years in a row you have to be a rising star before you've risen, but they keep giving me the award. Been in Legal Elite, and anyway, for what it's worth, I think the question was probably written by a Reyes supporter, but that's okay.
I thought we were going to do that a little more subtly.
I've been rated AV by Martindale Hubble for 27 years. I think that the Count My Vote initiative is a wake-up call for the rest of us. I think it has generated a very healthy conversation about what's good about the caucus system and where some improvements could probably be made. Some of those improvements, I think, are focused almost entirely on people not understanding how it works. I think it's wonderful that an individual who's willing to take the time to get involved can have, frankly, a disproportionate impact on how our state and country are run. It's an opportunity that I have taken advantage of many times. It's an opportunity that I would treasure for my children and grandchildren. So if Count My Vote passes as Attorney General, I'll enforce it because that's the job of the Attorney General, irrespective of one's opinion. But I've not endorsed it. I've not signed the petition. I'm not interested in being part of their campaign.
For the last 13 years, I've been in the military, so I don't have a current Martindale Hubbell rating. But when I was last in the office, I was selected as the Tax Practitioner of the Year by the tax section of the bar. As to count my vote, I'm for whatever empowers the people and engages the most the people in the process. I've been in mass meetings when there were 2 guys in a living room. And in 2010, I was in a school where it was filled to overflowing. That was the Bennett Lee year. And so I'll simply suggest that as we look at this, what we want is a system that engages the bulk of the citizenry. Not with money, but with grassroots. Somebody needs a microphone.
Like others, I've been at the law school for the last 7.5 years, so I haven't participated in the Martindale Hubbell rankings. Let me just tell you my story about the caucuses. I grew up in California. We lived in a number of states, including Illinois, Maryland, Virginia, Indiana, Idaho, and I can tell you that it is a privilege to be a part of the caucus system. When we first moved here 14 years ago, my neighbor called me up and said, if you're a Republican, we're picking you up tomorrow and going down to the caucus. And I didn't know what that was, and by the end of the night, I was a state delegate, and I was participating in the selection of our congressman. And we had 10 Republican persons who were vying for the nomination that year. And it was a thrill to participate with them and to be part of the opportunity to choose our congressman from the state. And since then, I had the opportunity to work in the party and in a number of capacities, and so I'm a real proponent, and I love the caucus system.
We'd like to express our appreciation for each of you coming down. We're lucky to have so many qualified candidates, and we appreciate your energy, your time, and all the hard work that you've done, and good luck to you. We'd like to maybe spend a little bit of time maybe mingling, ask a couple quick questions before you go. Thank you very much.